Welcome to the Nebraska Shootaround podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Bigelow, the men's basketball beat writer for Varsity. And joining me, as always, is Huskers Illustrated's Jacob Bigelow. Biggs, how are you doing as we record another late-night episode of this podcast?
Still waiting for us to add After Dark to the title, but I'm doing well, man. You've had a long 2 days of state championship football down in Lincoln at the stadium. Funny enough, we talked to each other on the radio yesterday, so we just can't escape each other. So here we are doing another late night, recapping last week and a little mini feast week preview, and then we're gonna get out of here and we'll talk to you leading into what will be a very interesting week next week, I'd say. Yeah. So this is the start of quite the stretch for Nebraska basketball, and we're here to guide the people through it.
The plan is for this one to be a little bit quicker than normal. I haven't had the time to really dive into the tape and review the games like I normally do, so it's kind of be more just what I remember off of seeing them live. But with the way you and I go, who knows how long this will end up lasting. Let's get into it. Try to knock it out quick as possible. We'll start with the St. John's game, hit on Arkansas-Pine Bluff, and then look ahead to the ESPN Events Invitational. So the St. John's game, we kind of looked at it as the first true test for this team after all bye games to open up the season. And I think it's safe to say that Nebraska flunked that test. A 70-50 loss to St. John's. 50 points is not going to win you a basketball game.
Yeah, if you had to compare St. John's as a test to the actual test, it was kind of like the first half was the multiple choice questions, and you guessed hard on them, and you pulled a few out. Yep. Then you got to that essay, and you're like, oh no, what do I do? I have no idea what to do here. It's like the old like AP history tests. Like you get to like the essays at the end, and you're like, oh. Here we go. There's my nerd reference for the day.
That is a really good one though, because like in that first half, like I don't even think Nebraska played particularly well. They led 27-20 at halftime. At one point, they led by 10. Was it 22? I think so. 22-12. I think was their biggest lead. Nebraska didn't play particularly well, but they played hard and they got some help, and they just happened to have a few things go their way. So it kind of like, just filling in bubbles and actually getting a few right here or there, because boy, was St. John's atrocious on offense in the first half. Just throwing the ball up at the backboard and hoping they could go get the offensive rebound, it looked like, for long stretches of that game. And Nebraska did a good job they didn't do a great job, but they scrapped at least and didn't give up a ton of second chance points, even though if they gave up offensive rebounds. So they kept battling and forced more bad shots, even when St. John's got their offensive rebound. Just everything that we worried about with this team, particularly with Derek Walker out of the lineup, showed up. And Sam Griesel, who had been a rock, who had been so good in the first couple of games, 8 turnovers in this one. And there were a few where it's like, Sam, what are you doing there? But a lot of them were just like, he ends up getting the turnover in the stat sheet, but it's a team turnover where there literally was nothing he could have done because nobody else was giving him any help. And Nebraska, the lack of ball handling, that is a serious issue against a team that pressures as hard as St. John's does and aggressively and extends all over the court. There just weren't a lot of guys getting open, whether it was against the press or with their half-court defense. They just made life difficult for Nebraska, and they really did not have any answers. And there were a few good possessions where they were able to get Sam the ball in advantageous situations, or where they pushed against the press and Sam was able to get in the paint, get downhill, and make some plays. But for the most part, Arkansas really gummed up St. John's really gummed up the offense and made life difficult for Nebraska. And they just had no adjustments throughout the entire second half. Nobody stepped up. And that's and Fred Hoiberg talked on Tuesday to preview the week, and that's one of the things he mentioned is like Derek Walker is their secondary playmaker. He is their pressure release when teams are really getting up aggressive on the perimeter, and they didn't really have that. It went very poorly when they tried to get the ball to the bigs in the middle of the floor, and so he just, with the personnel in place, didn't really have an answer. I mean, Keisei Tominaga was the one guy that finished in double figure scoring. He had 15 points, was 3 of 6 from 3, 2 of 2 inside the arc. Hit a couple of free throws, so good on Keisei, but nobody else finished with more than 8 points. And second place was Juwan Gary, who shot 4 of 14 from the field and missed all 5 of his threes.
Yeah, I mean, you love seeing the effort and the energy from Keisei, but I mean, him being your leading scorer, it's going to be rare for that to be a winning formula against high major competition. I mean, we talked in our little miniature preview we did about how St. John's had kind of started games slow and then like turned it on in the second half and you know found a way to win. They did that kind of on steroids in this game. If you haven't been paying attention to St. John's since they beat Nebraska, they've gone on to win 2 more against Temple, and then they beat Syracuse tonight at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. So they might be okay. Yeah. They might be okay. They might be, could do some things in the Big East. Who knows? They've definitely shown some encouraging signs compared to what some may have thought from them. You got to I think a big part of Nebraska's advantage they had in the first half was David Jones being in early foul trouble, because he came in the second half and kind of went crazy between him.
Yeah, he scored 15 points in the second half, 15 points in 16 minutes in the second half after going scoreless and playing just 7 minutes in the first half. He picked up two fouls in the first 2 minutes, and Blaise Keita drew both of them. Got fouled around the basket, missed the free throws, unfortunately, but then took a charge on him, and he was sitting on the bench for a while, and that allowed Nebraska to kind of take control of the game early on. And in the second half, he stayed out of foul trouble. He finished with 3 fouls in the game, and so St. John's outscored Nebraska 50-23 in the second half. The Huskers shot 8 of 32 from the field, including 2 of 14 from 3, and had 11 turnovers. So yeah, that's bad. Very, very bad.
Yes, and especially when you allow one guy to have 18 rebounds. That also is another not great thing either. But Joel Soriano is having a good start to the season, so it's not the typical who the hell is this guy going off against Nebraska kind of. But still, one single guy finishing with 17 points and 18 rebounds against you is never ideal either. So just kind of, second half was kind of just a house of horrors, just every worst case scenario you could possibly think of. You hit the nail on the head with, Sam. It's kind of a side effect of only having one real primary ball handler. It kind of, with and still in instances like that, I'm going to think, could Ramel Lloyd help in some way?
Yeah.
Could Cale Jacobson, maybe not against St. John's, but in some other situation, just help handling the ball? I mean, it's, that kind of just, I don't know, not made my skin crawl, but just made me uneasy. Just kind of seeing Sam get thrown to the fire with that St. John's press and pressure and, well, press means pressure. What am I saying? It's late. But I mean, there's just, no room for error when wasn't a backup plan to handle the ball or to initiate offense.
Yeah, so that's the question now as we move ahead that Nebraska is going to have to be able to answer as they head into the Big Ten conference play and against some of these other high majors. Not everybody is going to play the style that St. John's does, but we also, again, wondered about the ability to create offense, to win individually and draw help to make plays for themselves and others who is going to be able to do that on this team? And the answer is nobody against St. John's. And so they're going to have to be able to answer that as we move forward. And we'll see kind of this next week will be the next big test, because that opening game isn't against a great team based on the results so far. They've got some good pieces, guys that are going to give them problems, but Oklahoma isn't a great team. And we'll see kind of who else they end up playing in that tournament. I think that second game could end up being against a pretty decent team between St. John's and Memphis. Like, neither one of them are great, but they're who did I say?
St. John's.
Yeah, just so many teams. The other Big East team, but yeah, so they'll face one of those two teams, and then the other half of the bracket, whoever they end up playing for the third game, I think will again have a chance to. That's a game against a somewhat comparable team. The big opportunities coming up. That'll be their next test to see did they learn from that? Do they have answers that they weren't able to come up with in game? That's what this becomes about now, because we didn't really learn anything from the Arkansas-Pine Bluff game. We can move on to that. And actually, so I had a double header on Sunday where it went straight from volleyball to basketball as volleyball. Shout out to the Huskers for sweeping Purdue to give me time to get over there. Had that gone 4 or 5, then would have been tough to get over to basketball at all. But because they took care of business, I made it there by the first media timeout. And Nebraska was up 11-3 at that point, and Juwan Gary had already hit 2 threes. So that was good. And they ended up building up a 20-12 lead, and then gave it all up, went into halftime, trailing by 3, and then they dominated the second half. I guess Arkansas-Pine Bluff started off well. They pulled ahead by 8, and then Nebraska blew them out the rest of the way. So it was an 82-58 final there for Pine Bluff. And so because the first half I was kind of having to – I was back in the media room trying to finish up my Purdue volleyball story. So I wasn't able to really lock in. Saw some plays here and there, but wasn't able to really lock in. What did you see in that first half that allowed Nebraska to get off to the big lead early, and then B, what happened the rest of the half where they Pine Bluff roared back and took the lead at halftime?
Kind of what we've seen in the other two, what we saw in the first 2 bye games. They feel like it's not scripted, but they have like their plays they run at the beginning, try to find an open look for Gary, corner, nails it. Another one, nails it. It's just like, okay. I looked at the guy next to me on press row, and I said, "Are we getting Shadron State Juwan Gary today? Like, is that what we're gonna see?" Then he just decided to take a lot of threes. Fred wants him shooting the open ones for sure, but I don't really think that is that's going to be effective. Kind of wasn't anything like stand out from Nebraska in the first half. They kind of just did their job. And then they kind of got too comfortable. They get up by double digits, and their defense looked a little lackadaisical. They were helping way too much, kind of like one pass away on like shooters, and Pine Bluff was just getting a bunch of open shots, and they were nailing them. They had one guy who had 17 points in the first half, and most of them were nailing a bunch of threes. Fred Hoiberg said that guys were hanging their heads when Pine Bluff was making their run, and you don't want to, obviously, if that's not what you want to see as a coach or a fan. But I think, what did Pine Bluff finish? They finished like 8 for 12 in the first half on threes, which is just, that's crazy. No matter who you're playing, 8 for 12 is a really impressive mark. But yeah,
Pine Bluff had 4 points in the paint in the first half. 4.
That's almost impressive as 8 for 12, to be honest.
It really was all from the 3-point line, and they hit one over the top of Keita at the top of the key at the end of half to take that 39-36 lead at halftime.
Yep.
And offensively, Nebraska, three guys scored 33 of their 36 points. You had Gary with 12, CJ Wilcher with 11, which is big to get him going, hit all three of his threes in the first half. And then Wilhelm Breitenbach scored 10 off the bench, hit all four of his shots inside the arc, got to the free throw line, had one of those little kind of turnaround push jump hooks that I noticed that kind of helped them early on take that lead. And then that was it. Three guys scoring almost all of their points in the first half. So that was interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. New career high for Wilhelm. He gets to 10 points in the first half and doesn't hardly play in the second half. Fred
played 3 minutes.
Yeah, Fred complimented him on still being able to provide energy on the bench after having a good first half. But I'm sure even with the lack of playing time in the second half, they liked both Wilhelm and those coaches had to like seeing the post moves, the post finishes work for him, even against lesser competition in an Arkansas-Pine Bluff. But was still just his 14th career game in playing D1 ball. So he's still getting the rust off. He's still getting his feet under him, and I'm sure seeing those go in has to be a good confidence booster for him.
Yeah. And the reason that he only played 3 minutes in the second half is because Blaze Keita played 14, and they were an eventful 14 minutes after kind of struggling in the first half. He was really good in the second, and he was the beneficiary of Sam Griesel kind of doing Sam Griesel things and the way that they were using him in the second half. And Keita had 13 points on 6 of 7 shooting and 7 rebounds in 14 minutes in the second half. Split a pair of free throws, which free throws have been a struggle for him. And I mean, Sam Griesel had 4 assists in the second half. All 4 were to Keita. 3 were for dunks, and 1 was for a little baseline, like 8-foot jumper. And he does, like, that shot is kind of in it. Like, he hasn't taken many of them at Nebraska, but that is kind of something that he did take in junior college. Didn't always look the prettiest, but he seemed to have a decent enough touch on it. So that was huge for him. He had a I think in the first half it was, or I can't remember now, but either the first half or early in the second half, where he kind of had a nice little post move and then lost his balance and just like threw the ball off the backboard. And after that, he was solid, finishing everything around the basket. And again, Hoiberg praised kind of the way that where he was playing on the floor. He was in the right spots, playing along that baseline, that dunker spot, circling around to the front of the rim when the defense would kind of help off to create passing angles. And they put Sam in the post as opposed to just kind of having him handle the ball out on the perimeter, having him run pick and rolls. They gave him a chance to back his man down and go to work in the post. And that created some opportunities for Keita as well. So Keita finished with this first career double-double, 14 points and 10 rebounds. So that was huge for him, to just confidence sake. Again, this is a guy that's still in the process of making that transition to Division I basketball from junior college, which is not easy. And a lot of guys, it's kind of bumpy rides when they first start playing, and Keita's very firmly in the midst of that. But that game was encouraging, if nothing else. It was good to just see him have some success, to do well. And it wasn't, and again, like he was making good reads, he's putting himself in the right spots, and then he was finishing the plays. And that hasn't always been the case so far this season for him. So great game by him. Gary finished with 17, 7 boards. CJ Wilcher, again, 15 points on 5 of 9 shooting. Didn't take a 3 in the second half, but had a couple strong drives and finishes around the basket. He had 3 assists, which is big. Finished with 17 assists on 29 buckets. So that's a good number to see. Everybody was kind of sharing the ball. You look up and down the lineup. Griesel had 7. Wilcher had 3. Vandemel had 3. Keita had 2 assists, which he's not a very good passer. Gary had 2 assists. So they were spreading around. A lot of different guys were moving the ball and setting each other up, and that's what it's going to have to look like for Nebraska. The guy that had 17 in the first half for Pine Bluff did not score in the second half, only took 2 shots. So they kind of figured that out and did a good job Sean Doss, who was their leading scorer, put up like 18 or 19 a game going into the game. Finished with 12 on 5 of 10 shooting, so not a bad game, but they didn't let him go off either.
Yeah, the most impressive thing he did was when he went baseline and yammed on somebody, not on somebody, in someone's general vicinity. But that was kind of the only thing he did really, and that was toward the end of the first half. So,
yeah.
And I think he hit the three at the end of the half too, if I remember right. But that was it.
Yeah. So, and Nebraska did. Hoiberg said they did a better job of not help. In the first half, there's a lot of helping too far off and being slow to recover as Pine Bluff moved the ball around and got those open threes. They did a better job. They switched some things up. They reacted a little bit better, and they closed better and made those threes tougher. They hit their first three of the second half, and again, they took an 8-point lead, scored the first 5 points there. And then Nebraska dominated the rest of the way. They only made 2 more threes the rest of the half. So they still finished with 11 threes, but after hitting 8 in the first, like you'll take 11 being the final number, and Nebraska continued to dominate the paint and took care of business. They looked like the far superior team in the second half, and that's what you need to look like in a bye game like this. Against a team that had given some teams some struggles, obviously TCU. We know what happened there. Oklahoma, that Nebraska is going to face, they only beat them by 8 or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, yeah, it's tough. It's still tough to know what to make of this team and how much better it can get. Like how many of the issues can they solve just organically as the season goes along. I still think some of those glaring flaws are there and just not going away. But this next week, we'll have a chance for them to prove that actually there's something they can do to have success this year. And that Oklahoma game, again, that's going to be the first game on Thanksgiving, 4:00. So, yeah, sit down with your turkey and your family and watch Nebraska ball.
Unless you're a Giants fan or a Cowboys fan.
Oh yeah, that's happening too.
That's happening too. But 4:00, ESPN, Nebraska, Oklahoma, just like the old days, except basketball. Like Jacob said, they only beat Pine Bluff by 8. They needed a late run to escape South Alabama. They lost their opener to Sam Houston State. Their leading scorer is Grant Sherfield, who's a Nevada transfer.
Should sound familiar.
Yep, should sound familiar. He played against Nebraska in the infamous Golden Window event back in the COVID season in 2020. So that name should ring a bell for Fred Hoiberg. They also have the Groves brothers, who were at Eastern Washington. Yep, and they transferred there when Porter Moser got the job at Oklahoma, and one of them's listed at 6'10", the other one's listed at 6'9", so they've got some size inside. And Porter Moser's a really good coach. We've seen him scheme some stuff up. He coached circles around Brad Underwood when Loyola knocked Illinois out of the NCAA tournament. I'll never forget that. So he's a good coach. And then he just hired Doc Sadler to park the van that Doc Sadler is living out of outside of the Lloyd Noble Center for the rest of the season. And so he could be a special advisor to the head coach. So that is Oklahoma. I said it on the radio on Monday. I'll say it again here. I think this game is really winnable. Ken Pom only gives Nebraska a 30% chance to win. ESPN BPI has it at like 34%. I think this one's winnable, personally. I think, I think in a perfect world, Nebraska goes 2-1 in this event. That second game scares me, regardless of who the opponent is, whether it's Memphis or Seton Hall. But then no one really from the other side of the bracket is all that daunting. The other side of the bracket is Florida State, Siena, Stanford, and Ole Miss. Florida State's 1-4. They started their season losing a bunch of bye games at home to the likes of Stetson and Troy, and they barely had to escape Mercer at home to get their first win of the season. Stanford, you never know what Stanford's going to be under Jared Hass. They continue to somehow get high-level recruits. They just got a commitment from Peja Stojakovic's son for the class of, I think, next year, right? Yeah, you never know what you're going to get with Stanford basketball. It's definitely been a roller coaster under Jared. Siena, definitely the weakest team in the field. They open with Florida State, so who knows? Maybe they'll beat Florida State. Maybe they'll be in the winner's bracket with how Florida State started. And then Ole Miss also has been very much a mixed bag since they hired Kermit Davis away from Middle Tennessee after they beat Michigan State in the tournament back in 2015. Ole Miss should have never fired Andy Kennedy. I'm not just saying that because he's a friend, but it's a bunch of mixed bags up and down this tournament, aside from probably Memphis. They're definitely probably the most talented team. And then Seton Hall in their first year under Shaheen Holloway, who is a Seton Hall grad, led the St. Peter's Cinderella run last year. I don't really know what to make of them. You kind of have more of an interest in the Big East than I do, so I don't know what the scouting report on Seton Hall would be, but that's my mini rundown of the ESPN Events Invitational.
Perhaps the most notable thing about Seton Hall is former Nebraska commit who reaffirmed his commitment and then decommitted after the coaching change is DeAndre Davis, who is now just going by Dre Davis. He is at Seton Hall, transferred there from Louisville, which I did not learn until I was watching a Seton Hall game earlier in the season, that Iowa game actually, where they got run off the floor by Iowa in the second half. Dre Davis is there with his younger brother Tay Davis. So that's another familiar name that Nebraska fans should know. But yeah, I think we'll see. Kind of, it's no reason to really focus on too much on the other half of the bracket and who we might end up playing. Oklahoma is up one. Like they got to go. Like you said, it's a winnable game. This is a big opportunity to show that they aren't the team that we saw in the second half against St. John's. And you mentioned Grant Sherfield. He's a good start to the season, 15.5 a game, 4.8 assists. He's shooting 41% from three. So that's a guy that they're going to have to shut down. We'll see. It'll be a big game for Emmanuel Bandamel. I'm assuming that'll be the matchup there. And then Tanner Groves averaging 10 and 10 and pretty good passer, 3 assists a game as well, converted at high rate inside the arc. And then beyond that, there's not, they're pretty balanced. Like there's not anybody that really scares you. Jalen Hill is 6'7", 6'6", kind of forward wing that doesn't shoot threes. He hasn't made one yet this season. It takes a little over one a game. And he's 7.5 a game, 5.5 boards. Joseph Bamisili, I guess, is kind of their leading scorer off the bench. 7 points a game and just under 14 minutes a game. And then Jacob Groves is just under 7 a game. Again, it's not a lot. CJ Nolan is at 5 a game. Milos Uzan is at 5 a game. So they just, I mean, if you basically shut down Sherfield, I think you'll have a great shot to kind of keep them in check. They're not a great 3-point shooting team. They're at just under 29%, 309th in the country. And they're kind of average, slightly above average in drawing fouls, getting the free throw line. They're pretty good at finishing inside the arc. So Nebraska's going to have to make life tough for them inside the paint. But that's kind of, they're not a team that forces a lot of turnovers. They're only forcing 9 turnovers a game. So this is not a St. John's team at all. They are 349th in opponent turnover percentage, and they are 281st in their own turnover percentage. So that's an opportunity here for Nebraska to kind of win the possessions battle, because they don't crash the offensive glass very well at all either. They're 310th, although they do rebound defensively very well. They're ninth in the country in offensive rebounding percentage allowed. So be curious to see kind of how that works, because that is something that Nebraska's emphasized and has been a strength early on, is crashing the offensive glass, and Oklahoma doesn't let teams do that. So this is again, they're going to go in. They're not going to be favored in this by any means. They're going to go in. What's KenPom have 6-point loss is what they're looking at right now. So certainly not a favorite, but this is a winnable game. It's a game that Nebraska has a chance to be in until the end. And then perhaps if they're in it down the end, we can see, can Nebraska make winning plays in a close game where they lost so many games last year because of those situations. Does this team have the ability to go make those plays, to hit a few free throws, to take care of the ball, to get a key defensive rebound? So that's kind of what I'm hoping to see out of this weekend. I just want to learn more about this team, because the first test, like we said, they failed it. But they've got a lot more coming up here before we even get into Big Ten play. And this is the first one where it's this isn't an AP test. I think it's just a standard regular test here. Not even an honors class at this point. Maybe that second game is a bit of an honors test, but beyond that, it's just, this is a winnable game. Like you said, it's a game that Nebraska should be able to stay in. And if they don't, if Oklahoma wins by double digits, kind of just comfortable win, then it's probably time to start getting really worried. And then at that point, I think all your hopes would be in the Derek Walker basket coming back and changing everything that they do, because that'd probably be the only thing left if you're looking for hope.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I think kind of regardless of the results this weekend, I mean, Derek is going to be kind of just what the doctor ordered whenever he returns. We saw a tweet today from the best equipment manager in the nation, Pat Norris, that included a jersey number 13 packed in the bag to go to Orlando this weekend. Maybe it's a troll. Maybe it's a sign of things to come. Who knows? But Fred told the media today that Derek is still day-to-day.
But he also said he's getting closer.
Yep.
That was kind of the phrase. Like he offered, like nobody asked. He kind of offered that himself when talking about Blaze and Wilhelm and what they talking about Blaze in particular, and then like offered on his own a Derek update, and then went on to say what Blaze and Wilhelm had done, kind of filling in for him recently. But he said getting closer, hope to get him back, and it's still day to day. So we'll see.
Yep.
They got 3 games down there in Orlando, and Derek's making the trip with his jersey. So who knows? But we will. Certainly that'll change things if he is able to get on the court at any point next week. And either way, we'll be back. I think we're looking at probably early next week, Monday, Tuesday, somewhere in that range to record next week before they get back at it.
And when we preview the highly anticipated Jim Molinari return game to Pinnacle Bank Arena as Boston College comes calling for our favorite thing, an 8:15 weeknight home game in the Big Ten ACC Challenge.
Yeah. If there's a must win on the schedule, it's that game.
Absolutely.
If you drop that one,
absolutely.
if I've got to be sitting there at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday night in November watching them lose to a Boston College team that is shockingly highly rated on KenPom considering their results so far.
Considering losses to Maine and Tarleton State, yes. The fact that they are still a top 100 KenPom team, I would consider baffling. But we get to that's the main event next week, right? Sarcasm. But there is a whole so we'll be back to talk about the weekend. We have our fingers. I have my fingers crossed for 2-1. We will see what we get down in Orlando at the ESPN Events Invitational, because they couldn't find sponsorship, I guess. But there's also plenty of other Feast Week tourney action this weekend. Plenty for you basketball fans to get your basketball fix, even if it's not just Nebraska. So watch some hoops, enjoy some time with family. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. We appreciate everybody who listened. If you're a first-time listener, throw us a follow or subscribe, leave a rating, tell us what you think. We appreciate all of you. We're thankful for you. Spend some time with family, eat plenty of food, and have a happy Thanksgiving. We will talk to you next week.